Oh, it's already been
just been
recorded.
Okay, thank you, Kate. That's all great. Thank you. All right, so let's get going. So welcome to week 2 of the Health Librarianship Essentials course, as it obviously sits on the screen. We'll move forward. We are talking tonight about the Australian healthcare environment and funding arrangements. And there's an awful lot to cover tonight, and I think we've got some excellent guests who are going to try and introduce you to these areas. It's quite a program, as you can see. To start with, we're going to invite Professor David Ashbridge to talk to us. I'll introduce David in a moment. And he's going to talk from the real sort of top policy side of things as to what is helpful to you understand about the health sector here in Australia. And Richie will follow, and she'll come sort of down a notch, if you like, and look at the role of health libraries and health librarians from a health library manager's perspective. So in a way, she's the link between some of the policy, the organisational activities that will happen in a healthcare organisation, and then down to the library staff who are doing sort of front of house activities with the clients. We're going to have a break after that and then shift away from that sort of policy environment into actually things that are probably closer to home for you, the provision of health information resources. So looking at the vast range of critical resources that are important for health librarianship, again here in Australia specifically. And then we've got another guest coming through, Bronnia Renson from Townsville, and she's going to give a bit of a case study around just one of the state arrangements around how the consortia works together to put together the resources that you do need to use in health librarianship. And then at the very end, I'll wrap up with some overview and information about your first assignment, the critical insights into health librarianship with your interview. So hopefully you're happy with that program, and we might just hit the airwaves in that case. I'll introduce David. David was, until very recently, Chief Executive Officer of Barwon Health, which is in Geelong. He was there for 5-6 years, and the Barwon Health organisation is a very large health service provider in Victoria. And there are over 6,000 staff, in fact, based at the University Hospital in Geelong. And there's a range of other services provided around mental health, drug and alcohol, community health, aged care, rehabilitation services, etc. So a very large portfolio. Prior to that, David worked for 22 years in the Northern Territory, where he initially practiced as a remote area medical officer in Aboriginal communities, and then moved on to become a public health physician, and lots of different executive roles across the Northern Territory, culminating as Chief Executive Officer of the Northern Territory Department of Health and Families. And he's also served as Chair of the Australian Health Ministers Advisory Council, so at the very top levels there, and is a board member of the National E-Health Transition Authority. And now he's been awarded a professorship at Deakin University and is also a member of the Deakin University Council. So we're delighted to have you with us, David, and we look forward to hearing everything that you're going to tell us. And microphone's over to you.
Jill, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, the floor's all yours. Okay, I'll mute mine.
So thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to take about 15, maybe 20 minutes, and I'm going to traverse a fair degree of content, but give a sort of an overview of the Australian health system. Give some insight from my perspective of what I think the strategic directions of the Australian health system are. Then I'm going to speak a bit about the role of the Chief Executive in our health system, and I'm going to end up talking about how I think library services and library functions can fit into organisation as well as the strategic directions of health. So let's go to the first one first, Australian health system. I think it's fair to say that it's not a system. I mean, it's certainly not systematic. In fact, it's quite it's quite a disconnected system, or a range of providers. There's multiple funders with the Australian government, the states, the insurance organisations, plus individuals themselves. Australia has one of the highest, if not the highest, level of co-payment towards health services of any nation in the world. It's also characterised by a separation of primary care from hospital funding, and I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind, because I think that is going to change in the upcoming future. And it's also characterised by highly organised and both professional bodies that get involved in both safety and quality, media commentary, as well as industrial issues. However, despite the complexity of the Australian health system, most people think it works okay, and so even though you could form a sort of a substantial critique of its complexity, by and large, the Australian health system does deliver quite good outcomes, and is in some ways an envy of many health systems around the world. So I guess I want to leave you with the notion that it's very complex, it's organised in a complex way, but that the way to manage the system is to understand how the various pieces relate to each other and how do you influence them. So then I'll give you some commentary of what I think around, in no particular order, about what I think the future strategic issues that need to be addressed within the Australian health system. From an illness management point of view, there's no doubt that chronic disease management is the key issue that will be confronted over the next 10, 20, 50 years, and it would appear that it hasn't stabilised and it is still growing. I want to make, later on I'll be talking around the importance of how that links to integrating health services, because no individual health component can actually address the issue of chronic disease management, but that is going to be unquestionably a key focus of the Australian health system. The issue of safety and quality and the need to continually improve is just an ongoing issue. It's not going to go away. We are never going to lick it. We are always going to have to be confronting it, measuring it, and improving on it. And I think the important thing is to note how that links to what the role of information services and library services would be in improving the safety and quality agenda, noting that that safety and quality, in my view, is going to get intrinsically linked to funding. Health systems have largely been funded on what we do and how many we do. I think the future is going to talk about how well we do it. And so the issue of safety and quality not just being a good thing to do, but an important thing for the revenue stream underpinning a health system is going to be paramount. So understanding what evidence-based practice is, how you manage health information to drive quality will become increasingly important. I talked earlier on about chronic disease, and I think that the overarching theme of the health reform in Australia, be it through the primary healthcare sectors and hospital networks, is about setting the foundations for what an integrated health system might look like in Australia at a regional level, where primary healthcare systems and hospitals start to cooperate in a much more meaningful way than they are at the moment. And in that notion of integration, that also takes you to what is the role in that strategic direction in terms of partnerships, and what's the role that organisations have to play in fostering that integration across the primary healthcare network. Integration is more than just integration of services. Increasingly, the role of consumers as part of that integration is incredibly important. It is clear that you cannot manage chronic disease just by the medical system alone, and that the people who suffer from chronic disease have to actively participate in their own care, otherwise it just doesn't work. And so the notion of how do we bring consumers inside the system and see them as part of the system rather than just passive recipients of the products that we produce. Chronic disease is a good example of that. As is end-of-life care, where the clear direction is that customers want to have more say in as to how they live their lives, but it's against a backdrop of a medicalisation of how services are provided. I the whole notion of how consumers are going to be more integrally involved in the provision of care is going to be a feature of health services going forward. The other I think, strategic area is the whole area of health information itself. Never have consumers known more about what's going on in their world, even though they might not trust the information sources that they access. But it's also true that health service operators and funding bodies have never known more about the population that they're serving as well. So the whole capability of the health system to use health information and to use it in terms of not only care but also service planning and funding is going to come to the fore. So I think that those areas are going to be fundamental. Obviously, each health service will have their own issues to actually deal with, but I don't think there's anything there that I've mentioned that would sit outside the realm of being an important feature of your health services going forward. In terms of what the role of the chief executive is in a large health service, I would define it in a couple of ways. But the first one is your organisation must be sustainable. If your organisation is not sustainable, then it is very difficult to move into the strategic domain. And I don't just mean sustainable in terms of finances, though that's clearly part of it, but also in terms of brand, also in terms of relationships with government, and also fundamental service delivery level. So you need to get those things right before you can go to the next plane. However, in my view, the role of the chief executive is to be involved with the creation of strategy, but more fundamentally to execute strategy, and to execute strategy on a daily basis. That is, to live strategy. So this means that when you're dealing with the administrative or the urgent issues, then if you have a conflict, then you turn to strategy to address the critical decision making. As a chief executive, you clearly can't be across all the decisions that need to be made in the organisation, but you do need to have faith, trust is the word I use, around the action and behaviours from all managers to implement the strategic plan, not only in terms of what gets done, but also how it gets done. So I think the key role of the CEO here is to make sure that it's a sustainable organisation, and that the organisation is strategic. And when I say an organisation is strategic, I think it's an organisation that believes in itself, and an organisation that sees a future horizon of 3-5 years and is believably working towards that. Another key component of a chief executive role is to understand that in my case, about 70% of the work is internal, with managing the organisation itself, but about 30% is a requirement to work with other partners. I mean, earlier on I talked about not being able to deliver health results in isolation, so the need to work with universities, the need to work with primary healthcare networks, the need to work with disability organisations, the need to work with government actually need to be managed, and it's in many ways it's the chief executive's role to take the lead on that. So in now coming back to what I think the link to the library professionals in the organisation, well, I think the first thing is that it is a professional role, and professionals have a responsibility to not only support the organisation but to also lead. And the leadership comes not only in supporting the clinicians, but also providing them with ways of thinking about how they might do their services differently. And so it's a mix of push and pull, and I think that there's clearly a professional role in that. I also think that that parts of an organisation that succeed are organisations that contribute and align to strategy. And earlier on I've talked about what I think the key strategic directions are, and I think sustainability here is much more than, I don't think of it in terms of how much money's in the budget. I think about how well it aligns to the strategic direction of the organisation, and the money will basically look after itself, in my view, if if you're aligned with the strategy of the organisation. So I think in the case of library services, I think I've mentioned safety and quality, I've mentioned consumers, I've mentioned health information. So my sense is that there is a requirement for the library professionals, the library functions, to actively participate in the health service that they work in, and to be proactive about that role, and not to be a passive recipient of the organisation as it moves along. So I might just stop right there.
Thank you, David, very much indeed. That was a really excellent overview of that sort of the role that you do or have been playing as CEO. Could I check whether there are any questions for David from anybody in the classroom at the moment? So yes, if you just note, Kate's going to manage your microphone if there are any questions. So Kate will toggle you on and off. But I think you raised some really important aspects around that strategic role. I'm actually doing a review of Commonwealth government libraries at the moment in Canberra, and those last messages that you had around making sure that you're seen to be a professional and contributing to the strategic direction of your parent organisation is absolutely critical. So yes, I sort of echo what you're saying in that space.
So can I just leave an offer that I know it might be a bit difficult, and maybe a bit embarrassing or whatever to ask a question right now. I'm happy to take them, but I'm also happy to take them on notice, as it were, and provide commentary if someone wants to think about what I've said and ask me a question privately.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, I need to...
Yeah, so all of you in the room, obviously, if you've got common issues that you'd like to discuss, then you could put them on Facebook and we can sort of feed them through to David that way as well. So, but certainly the framework, the ideas that David has presented in terms of where the libraries fit in the bigger picture, I think is very important for you to comprehend and to take on board. So David, thank you. We appreciate your time as ever. It's great to have you with us.
Okay, and I'll be off and all the best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Just to continue, there was another slide which David didn't actually speak to, but that's in your slides, obviously, the presentation folder. And that gives you, you can't read it obviously on the screen here, it's way too complex and tiny font. But take a look at that, because that addresses the funding arrangements across the health sector, looking at like primary health care, hospitals, and then other recurrent spending and things like that. So that might give you a bit of an insight into where the money goes to start with, but then obviously as well, where does the library need to support different activities within that schema. So let us move along to Anne. And Anne is Director of Library and Literacy at Barwon Health. But importantly, she's also convener of ALIA Health Libraries Australia. So just to introduce Anne very quickly, obviously at Barwon Health, she's based at the University Hospital in Geelong, and for the past 2 years she's researched the needs of health professionals for future library services, so taking the sort of the client perspective as to what is required. And now she's been translating that vision of what's required into reality. And the new library opens on the 17th of March, which is next week. And indeed, I understand you've all been moving premises over the last day or so as well. So I'm really pleased that you're able to join us when you're probably absolutely exhausted. So Anne herself, she's got a master's qualification in health and has managed health libraries for most of her career, with some occasional stints in academia, in research, training, and indeed publishing. So her main professional interests are, very importantly, marketing, mentoring. She's supporting and leading, I suppose, really the mentoring program that we've got going in this course. And then also professional development and health literacy. Her most recent article that's been published was around ebooks at Barwon Health, a case study, and that was in the Australian Library Journal in August last year. So Anne's going to tell us about some of the challenges, I'm sure, but she believes that the things facing libraries in the next decade relate to recreating and fine-tuning our relevance to the needs of our organisation and our clients, and importantly, to healthcare consumers who represent a new client group for most health libraries. And obviously that draws on some of the things that David was saying in his presentation. So let me hand over to Anne, and we look forward to hearing what you're going to have to tell us. You all right, Anne? You've got the microphone? Hello, Anne. You were hearing us and speaking before, so let us just check. Just bear with us when we work this one out.
My mic. Okay, there I am. Have you got me?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. All yours now. Yes.
Hello.
All yours now. Yes.
Sorry about that. The microphone disappeared from the screen for some reason, but it's back again. So yeah, I just had to duck out for a minute, but I'm back and ready to go. So I gather you just gave a brief intro, Jill, about me.
You just click in there? Yes. Yes, I just I read out some parts of your bio that you've provided.
Okay, thanks. So my bit tonight is to bring it down a notch into the real world of health libraries, and from a manager's perspective, give you a bit of a spiel about the way I view the responsibilities, of which there's one primary responsibility, the functions, and there are three major areas of functional activity that I can touch on, and then the roles. And the roles of health librarians are many and varied. However, they sort of fit into those three functional areas. They're just given lots of different titles. And as I said, it is a manager's perspective. Now, the thing that I won't, or a couple of things that I won't actually be talking about is anything to do with budgets, because that's another whole issue by itself. But let me just say that roughly in a health library, you're probably looking at about a 50-50 split, something along the lines of 50% going on collections and 50% going on staffing. But it varies quite a lot between different organisations as far as that goes as well. I won't also be talking about policy, even though that is part of a manager's responsibility, but it is another topic, except to say there are probably two major areas of policy that health libraries would need to look at. One of them is about collection development, and the other one is about membership policies. And the other kind of thing that I won't really be touching on is any kind of planning activities. But let me say that you need to be involved with business planning, with strategic planning, and I would add marketing planning. And probably what you're going to get, probably what the perspective that I'm use as my framework for analysis is a marketing perspective, and you'll probably be able to see that as we go through the presentation. So are you driving the slides, Jill? Can you flip me over? Thank you. Okay, so as I said, primary responsibility of health libraries, and the definition that I've used with the asterisk there, responsibility being the state of being responsible, accountable or answerable, a duty, obligation or liability for which someone is held accountable. So basically, if you're not doing this, then you're not doing your job as a health library manager. And that is to support the business purpose of their organisation, of the library's organisation. And for example, the business purpose is about patient care if you're in a hospital, and that's about individuals, families and carers, and as increasingly, as I heard Jill just mentioned, consumers are a new client group for us. So for a lot of hospital libraries, we haven't had anything to do with face-to-face patient information, but now that's increasingly going to be the case. Some health organisations have focused more on population health, and you'd be looking at whole communities or geographic catchment areas or groups. So your focus might be on children, you know, a children's hospital, for example, or a children's research institute, or it might be on women or disabled or autistic or depressed, all these different categories of clients that come in groups, or it might be the whole state of Victoria, whatever. And then there are other types of organisations that are primarily concerned with education, for example, universities, research institutes, policy organisations, program providers, and they influence in some way the delivery of health services by either training the future clinicians or by contributing through a research basis. So that, in a nutshell, the primary responsibility is to support the business purpose of whatever organisation you're in. Now that also gets flavoured by the way that health libraries fulfil their primary responsibility depends on the requirements of the users, and this is where you'll see my marketing perspective coming through. The requirements of the users are the clients, the patrons, the customers, the citizens in a democracy, whatever you want to call your user groups, but that is going to influence how you deliver on your primary responsibility. And it also depends on the type of organisation you serve, and I've already talked about it could be a hospital, it could be a university, research institute, all these different sorts of organisations that health libraries are contained in. So the way you do your, that next slide please, Jill. The way you fulfil your primary responsibility also depends to some extent on where you fit in the organisational structure. So for example, you might be part of a clinical division or a faculty if you're in a university, and that varies across different universities. You might be part of an education division and concerned more with teaching and learning, or it might be part of a research directorate, and so your focus is very strongly in the whole research sphere. And in some organisations, libraries are part of corporate services, and then they become more of a part of the information services division or the knowledge management, as it is in different types of, for example, law libraries, or IT departments, that sort of stuff. And it also, how you deliver on your primary responsibility does depend on how you contribute to your organisation's business plan and strategic direction. I think you probably got that message pretty clearly from David's presentation, that strategic direction and aligning with that is really important. So that's a bit about the responsibilities. The next bit is about the function. So how, you can see the definition that I've used is a function is what something does or is used for. So the way health libraries deliver on their primary responsibility is how they deliver in three functional areas. So they're delivering system services and activities in three functional areas. The first of which is collection management, and any type of library you will know that collection management is part of what you do, and that's all about building, creating, maintaining unique subject-based information and knowledge resources. And in health libraries, it's about providing the evidence base for decision-making in practice, program and policy development. That's the first functional area. The second one is actually about information access. So how do you make those collections, those information resources, available to your users? And there are a number of different ways. There are reference and research services, and then you can see some of the activities that sit under that kind of broad banner of reference work. There are knowledge management systems underpinning and streamlining the discovery to delivery of the resources. So all those kinds of systems like our library management systems and catalogues and reference management systems, all that sort of stuff, actually streamline that from the discovery to the delivery mechanism. And then if we aren't finding the resources and giving them to our clients ourselves, then we're teaching our clients how to do it for themselves, and that's where the whole area of user education, it's called information literacy these days, but it can come under the banners of academic literacy, research literacy, consumer literacy, and that's the sorts of activities around user education that we undertake in order to help our clients find the information for themselves. Okie doke, next one. The third functional area is all about collaboration and networking, and I see this as extremely important. Sometimes libraries think that they can operate in isolation and do it all themselves. I'm aware of some collection development policies that have, and it is a principal aim is to be self-sufficient in your collections. Well, those days have passed, and we all actually need to share, and we have some fantastic ways of sharing resources, and in the health area particularly, there are networks we use through Libraries Australia document delivery networks and the Gratis network, which are really extremely well used and allow us to enlarge our knowledge base enormously. But they are cooperative arrangements, and it's important that people actually give and take in those cooperative arrangements. Some other types of collaboration and networking, consortial type purchasing, and the call, the university libraries has very strong consortial purchasing arrangements. And then we've got state-based government services, and I've just put down the names of the ones that I know around the different states in Australia. And Bronya, later on in this session tonight, is going to be talking about the example that's in Queensland, the CKN, the Clinicians Knowledge Network. And then another way of collaborating networking is through shared repositories, and I've given a few examples of them there. The last one that I've put down is the ANZ, which is the Australian National Data Service, and the idea of data repositories, which is relatively new to the library sphere of work, and data management and research data management is a really evolving and rapidly evolving field for health librarianship, because we've got a lot of research and we've got a lot of data in our organisations. So that's the functions of health libraries. The third area that I want to move on to, oh no, I've got some additional functions here, because there's a huge emphasis now on what we do with our library spaces, and the library spaces have been under threat because space is very valuable, especially if you're in a departmental library in the CBD, and somebody will look at that space and say, we're paying so much per square metre, couldn't those collections be stored off-site? Or better still, couldn't we have a digital library and be completely online? And that's a real scenario. However, these spaces can be used in other ways besides from collections. So I've got some examples there where I've seen spaces used quite differently from being the sort of familiar collections-based examples. I always say that the data might be in the cloud, because people will say, oh, well, everything's cloud-based these days. I would say, well, the data's in the cloud, but the people are on the ground, so the people need spaces to be in, and we've got lots of ideas about how we can use those spaces. Okay, so then the next in the structure of things is the roles of health librarians, and I said at the beginning that there are many and varied. So the definition there, the designation, roles are a designation that denotes an associated set of responsibilities, knowledge, skills and attributes. My definition of health librarian, a specialist health information professional who is able to cover 8 domains or competency areas of knowledge and skill sets. And this course, for example, is based on 4 of those domains, the first of which is the knowledge of the health system, which is the unit that we're covering off in these first couple of modules, or the first couple of sessions. There's a list of all the competencies if you want to follow up and see what's in there. And the roles that then draw on this competency-based of specialised advanced level, I guess is the way to put it, from basic librarianship. The roles are structured around the 3 functional areas and particularly tailored to a health environment. And on the next slide you'll be able to see just some of the examples of the names that the roles take on. So the reference and research librarians we're all familiar with. Informationists really did come out of the health in a research area, but that's all about embedded librarianship in specific areas. And then we've got the role of clinical librarian, which essentially is a reference librarian, but really working with the clinicians and as part of clinical teams. And then additionally, in universities, they might be called faculty librarians or liaison librarians if they've got a health subject-based responsibility. All sorts of collections and resources type of roles, and often they're called systems and electronic services librarians. The educational sphere takes on e-learning librarians or literacy specialists. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the research data management is a new and evolving role. So finally, I'm getting to the kind of pointy end of all this. Why are we essential? Why are health libraries essential and strategically essential in our healthcare organisations? I've said that our primary responsibility is about fulfilling the purpose of the organisation, but how do we actually make this relevant in a strategic sense? Well, it's all about governance, and governance means that organisations are responsible and accountable for decisions made by their employees. For example, a hospital has ultimate responsibility for clinical and patient care decision making. If somebody makes a boo-boo, then the hospital and somebody in the hospital takes responsibility. So how do we help our organisations to be well governed? Well, health libraries can ensure access to the best available evidence-based information through their stewardship of externally published information, and that's the bulk of what we have in our collections, but also internally generated information. And this is where the role of a librarian can be really critical, and I'd say a clinical librarian has a huge responsibility in this, in the guidelines, the policies that are created in organisations. But also, if you think about the research reports, research is the knowledge that's generated out of an organisation. So, for example, a university has research functions. If the library is really proactive in a digital repository sort of way and gathering that information from the research and the articles that the researchers have generated, they are performing a huge service for their organisations. And this is how they can show themselves to be essential. And then the second area that I've got down as a kind of strategic plank is about the legislative and regulatory frameworks that our organisations operate under. So, for example, the National Safety and Quality Accreditation Standards. Health services, all different types of health services are accredited, and it's through national safety and quality types of regulators. It's the same in the accreditation of universities or educational institutions, although I'm not so familiar with that area. But research and ethics are all governed by standards that organisations and researchers have to comply with. There are teaching accreditation standards for universities, and then APRA, which is the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, and health professional associations actually have to be able to support their professional members' continuing professional development and also audit and risk management frameworks. So, in summary, my messages are, in a nutshell, health libraries' primary responsibility is to support the business purpose of their organisations. Health libraries provide functional capacity in three key areas, and these are around collections, information access, and collaboration and networking. The functions are fulfilled through the expert services of professional subject-based librarians in roles appropriate to the organisation. A professional health library service guarantees that the work of the organisation's staff is supported by the best available, highest quality research and evidence-based information. And finally, health libraries are essential to an organisation's governance, safety and quality, and risk management frameworks. So that's it in a nutshell. Does anybody have any queries for me? Or any comments?
Thank you from me, Anne, very much indeed.
Was that too fast?
There was a lot to take in, certainly. But I think I can just hear my voice in the background. But I think it's really important that the participants can then sort of pick up and go back to all of what you've been saying, listen to it a second time to really absorb the emphasis that you've placed on those different areas. Kate just said she's muted you at the moment.
Yeah, okay, so I can see it's unmuted. Yeah, Cecily just had a kind of a question there. Do accrediting organisations look at library services in hospitals? The professional bodies who are accrediting teaching hospitals do ask the question, do you have a library service and does it provide resources for our, for example, anaesthetics trainees or gastro trainees or critical care trainees, whatever it is that they are accrediting on for their training program. And so very often we get visits by contingents of assessors or accreditors to come in and check out the library services to make sure that the organisation is actually providing those services for their trainees. So that's one thing. The National Safety and Quality Accreditation Standards have a number of different areas where health libraries could contribute, but it's pretty patchy across all hospital libraries around the country how that actually happens. But I'm sure there are other ways that in other health services organisations that happens.
There's a question there from Stephen as well, if you'd like to just look at the checkbox.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Yes, I do. I've got a Master's in Public Health, and I did an undergraduate in librarianship, and I basically had arts electives, a bit of social science sort of electives, but I always liked the area of health. And when I got into a health library, initially it was family planning and then hospitals, I realised that I needed more expertise in understanding the area of health and particularly research. And so I did a Master's that was a research-based Master's, and I did it in the area of health because I wanted to be able to have a higher level of understanding of the whole area of health. I'm not really suggesting that anybody who wants to be a law or librarian should do a legal degree, but I found it particularly useful, particularly the areas of epidemiology and biostatistics, and the whole research design, qualitative and quantitative research design.
Yeah, thank you. That actually does cover Nikki, who was on the panel last week. She's also got a background in librarianship with the health as well. And I understand that she's considering moving into a PhD study in the health side of things, not actually in the information side of things. So it's interesting the directions that careers can actually take from those areas. And there's always been a lot of debate around specialisations. For law librarians, for example, there's quite a push to say, well, if you're a lawyer as well as being a librarian, then obviously you're going to deliver a better service. The fact that we have postgraduate qualifications means there are career change opportunities where people do move in from that sector, a different sector, into librarianship and blend those two areas. I think in this program we do have people who've got a nursing background or allied health or something like that. So it's a legitimate way to sort of build your expertise and have the ability to deliver the services that are organisational specific as well. So that's great. Any further questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if anybody had a clinical qualification and they came into a health library, I think it's extremely useful to be part of the multidisciplinary team environment.
Yes, that's another thing to highlight, actually, I think, is the multidisciplinary perspectives that are beginning to come in. I'm doing some work with the University of Queensland. I've been talking with some of the different faculties, and in the HABs, which is RUA, I can't remember, it was the sort of allied health professionals. They're actually in their first year, this year for the first year intake. They're working in their disciplinary cohorts in the first semester, and then they're going to be all working together on a couple of units of study in a multidisciplinary, actually beginning to develop multidisciplinary teams from the first year of education. So I think there's some messages there for librarians to begin to get involved in understanding how those multidisciplinary teams are working and the contribution that as information professionals that they can bring to those areas. So,
yeah.
Any more questions for Anne while we're there? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you. I hope that what you've been talking about will really help all of you who are undertaking the first assignment to again understand some of the priorities, some of the really important aspects of health librarianship, to then take that into some of the interview situations where you're going to be interviewing health librarians. There's a lot of stimulus, lots of good ideas, I think, coming from Anne's presentation there. So, and not just for your assignment, I think for your careers, obviously, going right the way down the track. So thank you for a very informative, very enriching presentation, Anne. We really appreciate it, and we understand why you are so embedded in the sector and in the profession. That's great. And it's about 10 to 7 in Queensland anyway. And so maybe just the way that the evening needs to run, it's better to take a very quick break now and then come back together and then have the cohesive second section of the program, which is around funding and the different resources that are funded for health, for the health sector. So can you come back? I know we've got a lot to cover still, so could you come back at around 5 to the hour? So that's about a 6-minute break just to go and stretch and do things, and then be back with us for 5 to the hour. Okay, so we'll see you all then. Thank you. All right, well, welcome back to part 2, and hopefully you were able to stretch a little bit and feel ready for the next lot of information that's coming your way. I should probably apologise to those people in Northern Territory and South Australia and places who are on half-hour time zones. When I talk about 5 to the hour, I should be inclusive and include you at sort of 5 minutes to the half hour as well. But I'm sure you're used to all of those idiosyncrasies of your time zones. Let's move along. Try and sort that slide out. And so you heard a lot in the first part around obviously the policy and operational environments of the health sector. Now we're going to come down another notch and look at the actual provision of health information resources. Now, this evening we've got Cecily, who's our project manager for the course. She's going to present on this. You can see the title there that she's actually research librarian with Barwon Health. So we're not trying to dominate the whole healthcare sector with Barwon Health tonight. Cecily's also got a very strong background in health research with the University of Melbourne and other places, and does a lot of work in East Timor too. So I'm going to hand over to Cecily, and who's going to talk way beyond just Barwon Health.
Thank you, Jill, and good evening, everyone. I hope that sound is coming through okay.
I switched my microphone off. Sorry. Yes, absolutely. You're very clear. Thank you very much.
Okay, then the segue from Anne's talk is pretty useful, really. What we're talking about here is that collection management aspect that Anne referred to, and what's certainly the case. Like every kid in a lolly shop, there are lots and lots of products which people working in the health sector would love to have access to, and they would like, of course, that it didn't cost very much at all, but it was always available. Every health librarian is in the position of having to decide how to spend the money that's available and to be able to afford the multiplicity of products. It's certainly arisen that some of the impetus has moved from individual librarians making purchasing decisions to the idea of state consortia. So groups in each of the states around Australia now exist to acquire health e-resources, and those are generally purchased for use by staff affiliated with either the state health department or the buying group in that state. The consortium usually acts as the buyer or the licensee of the product, so that the people in the libraries are not necessarily the individuals who sign in, but that does vary a little. The consortium's role in selection of products is generally to assemble a package of materials which is agreeable and can be agreed to by a broad span of health libraries. And finally, the consortium might participate in also enabling access to the products and promoting that service to the people throughout the state. Just as an example, I hope that you'll be able to have a look here at the SALUS website, which is the consortium webpage for health libraries in South Australia. You can see on this screen a shot that SALUS uses its web space to tell you just a small bit about how to use things there on the bottom left-hand side. On the bottom right, shortcuts that allow people with one click to drive straight through to the product that they're very interested in using at that moment. And some of those things will be drug resources like MIMS Online and therapeutic guidelines. Many of the logos there you'll probably recognise, but you'll get to know in the course of the course. On the right-hand side of that same window, there are shortcuts provided for people to log in when they are off-site, so when they're using these resources but aren't based in their own home institution but working from maybe a home site or somewhere else, then a login may be required for those things. Across the top of the screen underneath the SALUS name, you can see tabs for each of the hospitals or health service providers in South Australian Health. And this is really handy because it allows people who come to the SALUS webpage to immediately click through to the institution that they're affiliated with, and whether that's South Australian Mental Health or the Queen Elizabeth Hospital or Flinders Medical Centre, as you can see from the tabs, it's a very clean way of allowing people to go straight to the products which are provided by their home library, as well as being able to see what's available to the entire group of the state. So, just stepping back a little bit, the rationale for statewide provision of e-resources. I'm using the rationale that was provided in New South Wales some years ago for the Clinical Information Access Program, or CIAP as it was known. This was probably the first state consortium group and got going in the late 90s. So reasons given were to improve access to decision support, support evidence-based healthcare, reducing adverse events, improving clinical knowledge, and improving communication between clinician groups. So you can see none of that says anything about rationalising cost or allowing libraries to be good service providers. It's all about aiming at targets which are highly valued by the end users and by the governance factors there. On this table, I've included information about all 8 state groups and the acronyms by which they are known. It's an alphabet soup these days, but for each of the states they've got an information program of some sort, and taking the top line, New South Wales has CIAP, which began in the late 90s. It serves potentially 80,000 clinicians, and on the final column of the table, what I've given is an indication of how those items are procured. So in some cases they're using what's called a centralised model, so one agency buys on behalf of the entire state. In other circumstances it's what's roughly known as mixed, where you have some participation or some input by people at individual sites or in a stakeholder group to a buying group. And in other places there isn't any strict procurement method. It's by arrangement as each product comes up. What I haven't been able to get, and it's a pity really, is pretty strong indications of what the spend is each year for those clinical products bundles. So a lot of that information is withheld because it's a commercial arrangement and can't be shared. It's commercial in confidence. But I think you can see from the approximate figures listed for Victoria and also for the Queensland group, the Clinicians Knowledge Network, or CKN, we know that we're talking about quite a number of millions of dollars, and it does seem likely that the figures we've got there are going to be a little bit higher than we were initially quoted. So you can see that we're talking about fairly expensive bundles of materials here. So then the question is, who's eligible to make use of this spending and get access to the resources? It's a clear yes for staff who are working in the public health system of their respective states. They're the people who are employed by the state health system or who work in the facilities of the state health system. It's touch and go, changes a little bit for the staff who come to the health system as visitors or as maybe only short-term placements. You may know that in many cases nursing staff are augmented by people who are employed casually from a nursing pool or agency. It's often the case that agency staff don't get access to state resources, so they'll be working in a ward situation. The person next to them who's on the full-time staff can gain access, but they can't because they're in the casual pool, and that's a problem. Students on placement at hospitals, those who are doing some sort of health-related course but come to the hospital to gain clinical experience, may or may not get access to a login that allows them to use the resources. It really depends on how long their placement is and what the agreement is between their educational institution and the hospital. Those who most usually don't gain access are people who are in general practice and people employed in private hospitals. So they may be carers, they may be providing some clinical care for people who are in the public system, but they don't necessarily get the same access to the resources. And GPs very sorely miss access to some of the products that are offered in the hospitals. Also, university affiliated staff don't automatically gain access. So it can be the situation where there's for instance, a research laboratory in the hospital setting, but it's staffed by people who are from a university. They have access to what their university affiliation gives them, but they don't have access to the material provided for the hospital staff. So moving on. The sorts of funding methods is something which has varied over time. These consortium arrangements initially started with a top slice arrangement, so the funding was paid out of the entire lump of the state health budget. But since that time, it's become a bit more nuanced, shall we say, and in New South Wales, for example, they have a knowledge resources unit that sits within the State Health Department, and the CAP funding, as I understand it, is a program for that knowledge resources unit, and it's their funding which provides the funds to obtain the resources for that consortium. In other states, there's a cost-sharing arrangement, so resources are bought by a group, in some cases a group of libraries, and each health service pays a proportion of the total cost. And likewise, the involvement of librarians in each of the states can be different. Clearly, there's varying degrees of librarian involvement in selection of material, in consultation with users to find out where the users would like some areas of information provision made stronger and what resources they feel are less useful these days. The area of contract management is one which is more usually taken by the State Health Department and not necessarily involving librarians. So you can imagine state health departments are already in the business of managing contracts for purchase of quite large volumes of material, and they are right across the business of calling for tenders and ensuring that there's confidentiality and all the other requirements to make the contract valid. Implementation of a consortium is often something which a librarian's skills could be quite valuable for, and it's good to see that when the librarians do have a role. So implementation is usually done via some sort of website, as we've seen here, but there's lots of back-end issues such as how do members know about it, how do they get access to a login, what does it take to have a user registered, and that sort of issues there. And finally, of course, support and training. So support can be technical, but it can also be where does this fit in the scheme of things which I'm expected as a clinician to make use of? Why should I bother about using something? Training is how to help people maximise the value and the use of those resources. I'm going to move now just to have a look at the provision of resources in one particular circumstance, and that's the Victorian consortium known as the Clinicians Health Channel. The reason I'm focusing on CHC is because obviously it's the one that I'm familiar with in Victoria for the moment, but I also want to use it as an example to reflect on how state resources provided through a consortium can also be integrated with the resources that are separately and individually purchased by health libraries for their own local needs. CHC, as we saw, covers something like 50,000 clinicians in Victoria. It's been around since the early 2000s, and it provides access to high quality resources in areas such as drugs and poisons information, medical research, bibliographic databases, full text journals, and in some cases some e-books as well. The contract with Clinicians Health Channel is managed by the Victorian Department of Health and Human Services, and you can see they make sure their brand sits over the website very, very strongly. CHC has a very strong profile of its own, so many clinicians who don't necessarily feel that they know their hospital library all that well will often know Clinicians Health Channel as a brand. It's very strongly marketed. But it's managed by also having a stakeholder group who give advice, and that stakeholder group comprises health librarians and also end user representatives. Over the years, CHC has had a variety of service providers, and in the initial stages it was the company called Health Community.
Cecily, I don't know if you can hear me. We've lost your audio. If you could just hold and we'll try and work out what's going wrong.
Cecily, if you can hear me, could you just type in the chat box and I'll just get you to work through a couple of quick troubleshooting things to get that microphone working again.
Kate, I can hear you, but I have no chat box to write in.
Oh, we've got you back now, Cecily.
Okay then. I can't see the screen though, that's the trouble.
Have you got slide? You haven't got a printout next to you? No? I can move the slides forward if we know where you are. Yeah, if you'd like to keep speaking, and then I can move the slides on until your screen returns.
Okay, that sounds good. I will try and steer us through that. Sorry everybody, a bit of a hiccup here, no matter. I think starting just to say that if you're using the resources of Clinicians Health Channel when you're on site at a hospital or at a community health service, then you won't need to log in, so that makes access quite smooth. But after you leave the premises, you'll be required to log in, and you can see the arrow pointing to the login screen just there. Jill, can we move to the next slide now, please? Okay. What I'm hoping you can now see is a list of resources in an A to Z sequence. Is that, Jill, can you confirm that that's there?
Yes. Oh, sorry, you can't see what we can see. Yes, the title is Resources A to Z.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Okay, so the presentation of resources in Clinicians Health Channel allows people to look either in broad categories, so they can look for things when they're looking for stuff about drug and information, drugs and toxicology and things like that, or they can look for clinical guidelines, point of care guides, full text journals and that kind of thing, or an A to Z list if they know the name of the resource that they're looking for. So that goes, that allows for people to find things in a number of different ways. Next slide, please, Jill. So just under
my microphone on. Integrating local with state is the top of the line.
That's great, thank you. Obviously, a health service isn't going to duplicate purchase of things for which are included in the statewide package. I think my screen is just coming back. I'm hopeful. And so what Barwon Health Library does on its website is allow people to see what it provides through local purchasing in conjunction with the material that's available through the Clinicians Health Channel. And so in the case of Barwon Health, the website's got links on both of those things, and using the you might see on the top line that area that's flagged as databases. Under that tab, if we go to the next screen, the databases tab lists material which is purchased by Clinicians Health Channel and also material that's purchased by Barwon Health and presents them in one integrated list. So clearly taking Mr. Ranganathan's fourth law, making it easy for the user, the idea is really strongly made that it is possible for one site to allow people to view resources from disparate providers. I want to come just to the area of training and support, because that's an area which some of the consortia don't handle all that well. A common feature of the consortia systems, those websites which have got a strong brand in particular, is that sometimes they blur the line between giving technical help to people and providing training. So they want to be a one-stop shop, and they advertise that they can do both of those things. I've got a screenshot here from the Clinicians Health Channel training and support page, and you can see for a number of the products there, they provide links to the tutorials from the product provider. So Embase has got an Elsevier tutorial showing there, and AusDiet has got an AusDiet tutorial. That's fine. They don't always direct users to the local library when it comes to training factors. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, training inquiries are directed to the CHC Training Manager, And there's no mention of any library backup or support for those kinds of questions about training. So it's a shame in my view, because I think staff in the libraries obviously have a role in user education, and it's also the fact that staff in the libraries know what the circumstances are of the local users, and they often are able to do a fair bit more in making the information real and usable when they're sitting beside them than the training manager in a central site is able to do. Finally, just a few questions about consortia overall. It's a great thing for people to cooperate and network and spend money wisely. I've got nothing but favourable comments about that. But I think when we're looking at consortia, my experience over the years leads me to just pose these few considerations. What's the makeup of the consortium's management body? This is what's the governance of the governance. We need to know who has a voice on the management of the consortium and how opinions are weighted, how products are selected. Do health librarians have input into the choice of service provider or the design of a website, for instance? What's the funding arrangement? And are there anything like guarantees about how sustainable that funding is? How do users get a login? Where do they go for help when it comes to getting technically stuck? What do they do? Is there a link from the library site where the users are to the resources of the consortium? And like in reverse, is there a link from the consortium's website to the libraries that are in the health services? That's something which the CAP site in New South Wales does quite well. And finally, just to go back to my point about training, there is a lot of scope for libraries to be involved in training, and it would be my feeling that that could be increased and improved quite a lot. When we consider funding, of course, nothing is guaranteed forever, and already some state systems have been through times when either funding was tight or there was a threat that their funding was going to be taken away at fairly short notice. This is 2016. We're shortly going to be going into what looks like a federal election year, and I'm watching health funding quite closely. One more thing just to finish up. National e-resource licensing, you'd think that would be a next level consideration, and it's certainly been talked about by Health Libraries Australia. There have been attempts to raise the question at a national level. For a long time, the federal government has funded just one national licence, and this is one we can all agree on. We've got free access for everyone in Australia to use the Cochrane Library, and no better resource to be providing for everybody. The funding comes through the National Health and Medical Research Council, and Australia was one of the first countries to take on a national licence for Cochrane. Our current licence ends 2017. As I said, this is an election year, and that's one of the things that we really want to protect. Australians are the highest per head users of the Cochrane Library in the world. So you can see in 2014 we downloaded more than 750,000 articles, or nearly 750,000 articles from the Cochrane Library, and that raced up 30% over just the usage from a few years prior. So it's an extremely valuable resource, and perhaps national provision is the way to go for some things which are hands-down winners. And thank you for coming through all of that with me. I think I've come to the end. Would there be anyone who'd like to ask questions?
Thank you, Cecily. I think you drew very strongly on David's comments about the increasing value of health information across the sector as well, and from both sides of consumers as well. So yeah, it's I don't know what participants in the course thought they were going to get in this course, or whether they're just going to get things they didn't really have to think deeply about. But I think this week certainly it's presenting lots of challenges and issues of the complexity of many of the areas. So thank you for those insights. And are there any questions from the floor? Again, I think it's probably... go on, you go, Cecily.
I might just finish then by pointing out that I've put together some screenshots from each of the state's consortia websites, and I know, Jill, you've loaded that onto Blackboard, so in the Week 2 resources, those slides are available to look at, so you get a sense of the different presentations that are used for each of the statewide systems. So I hope you can make use of that as well. Thanks, Jill.
No, thank you very much indeed. The research that goes into all of that, the complexity across the different states and territories and the funding models and all of those things, it's not an easy game at all. So can I sort of emphasise for all of you in your individual states and territories that it's obviously not just understanding the big overarching sort of understanding of the resources, but you need to become very closely aligned with what's happening in your own particular region or state. Anne has commented there to say that she's interested to is interesting to compare the South Australian model run by libraries as opposed to other states which are largely run by health departments. And so there again, where's the professional role that contributes to all of that? And I suppose that's a perfect segue into our next guest speaker, and I hope she is still with us. Bronya's gone. Where's Bronya gone? Bronya, you were a host. Let me just make you a host again. We do have with us, let me just check with Bronya. Are you there with us and you're able to? She keeps dropping, Kate, just to say that every time I make Bronya a host, she drops back down again. Okay, or she's a presenter now. Okay. No, we've lost her again. Just checking what's going on. Now she's a host. Okay. Okay, Bronya, are you there? And do you have access to the microphone? Is your microphone operating okay? Bronya and Kate are typing. I'm here. What's wrong with my mic? Okay, I'm going to defer to Kate to do a bit of problem solving here. Just need to turn it on.
Bronya, you just need to look for the microphone button at the top of the screen. You probably wouldn't have been able to see it before, but you should have it there now. It'll be a grey shape. Oh, we almost had you. We lost you. We can only just hear you, Bronya.
Okay.
Only
I'll
just.
increase the volume, just microphone volume, and I'll put that. How's that? Is that better? Can you hear me now?
That is, yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That sounds
Okay.
Good. Okay. No, I'm going to introduce you first, Bronya. Stop it. Stop it.
Thank you, Jill. I won't touch anything.
That's all right. Well, obviously we extend a very warm welcome to Bronya. We are moving way away from Barwon Health to this section and shooting up a few thousand kilometres to Townsville. So Bronya's joining us from there. Bronya's Director of Library Services at Townsville Health Library, and she's been there for quite some time, but has been working in the whole health sector in Melbourne and Townsville across her career. So since 1997, Bronya's been managing the Townsville Health Library, and this is one of the larger libraries across the whole Queensland Health Network. And her special interest is really in research, so she's been participating in different systematic reviews, also serving on a human ethics research committee, and has been co-investigator with funded research projects in nursing and allied health. Beyond this, she's actively involved in ALIA's Health Libraries Australia, HLE, and is currently Secretary of the Anne Harrison Award, which you're going to hear more about in different areas of the program as well. So I'll leave it at that, and over to you, Bronya. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jill, and hello, everyone. Okay, I've been given some headings, so I'm going to do my best to talk to each of these. And arrow down doesn't work.
Are you comfortable to move the slides forward?
That
yes.
works.
Okay.
Good. Great. Yes, I've got them now. Good. Okay, Cecily has mentioned, I've been lurking and listening to Cecily, I don't want to repeat what she said. She's mentioned CKN, Clinical Knowledge Network, It is a multi-million-dollar tender. The management is outsourced on a 5-year contract, and that's overseen in Brisbane. The resources are available to all Queensland Health staff at work and at home and on their mobile devices, according to which electronic resource you're on. CKM purchases a number of databases with linked full-text resources and other packages. And I think we have a screenshot of that somewhere, probably in the ones offline. We also have the other formal agreement we have is a smaller one, EBL, eBook Library, which was started some years ago when Queensland Health was one of the monolithic government departments. We've since then been divided up into separate commercial entities. We each have our own ABN now, but this consortium still exists and it's very useful. What happens is any one of the Queensland Health libraries purchases a book and all Queensland Health staff can use. They can access, they can locate the books in several ways. I'll show that later. We standardise on the model of the 325 loans per annum. It's a very beneficial legacy of the old times. And I know I'm supposed to talk about electronic resources, but we also have a print book tender which I've managed in Townsville for quite some years. It's refreshed every few years, and we do it on behalf of, initially it was just the North Queensland hospital libraries, but now it's any of the Queensland Health libraries. And it's a fairly big job to issue the tender and consult with everyone, even though it's not a big value tender. But the important thing about this is it's not an exclusive tender. Most state government departments tend to be. I mean, if you want cheap bandages, you want to lock in the price, and the competitors shouldn't be sniping at you. But this one is books. It is different. We've won that argument, and it's not an exclusive tender. So we can do an urgent purchase from a book from a local bookshop. This happens more in Brisbane than in Townsville because we don't really have an adequate bookshop, medical one. But we can also purchase with credit card from overseas. I've got a few comments about writing and managing the tender. And this is from my experience. It's critical, Cicely alluded to this, it is critical to consult with the librarians who are in daily contact with the clinicians to get the correct mix. The clinician's focus is patients. They don't want to be bothered about procuring electronic resources. They work on the patients. The health librarian's focus is providing the information to help the clinician to treat the patient. It's quite a significant difference. Anyway, librarians are cheaper than clinicians. I don't know why you'd want to consult directly with clinicians. But if there's an outsourced manager of resources, which is also a publisher or a vendor, there is a potential for conflict of interest, or at least the perception of conflict of interest, and that is a serious thing which needs to be managed. So in my opinion, the best management model is a committee of practicing health librarians, plus some clinicians who are interested, and purchasing from a specified range of publishers. No single company can provide all the resources. I believe the Western Australian model purchased from a panel of suppliers, and I know they're just refreshing their tender now, but I understand that it worked fairly well. One thing I've found is that one shouldn't assume that the contract management staff in your organisation understand library business. Sometimes they don't even understand the tendering business. So electronic resources are very different from bandages and photocopy paper. What you've got to do is try and assess the level of their knowledge. Some of them might be acting, they might be very new, they might be out of their depth, but you've got to try and find a way of steering the process to an acceptable conclusion, even if their skills and advice is somewhat deficient. Sadly, you only find that out too late. But anyway. The other thing I'm very keen on, and I don't always achieve, is to try to negotiate payment of invoices in Aussie dollars, because large invoices in a foreign currency generally send the finance managers into shock, or at least into go slow mode. Queensland Health does not hedge foreign currency, as some universities do, and that is a disadvantage. Now, Cicely also mentioned you can complement state resources with your own local resources, and we all do that, and Townsville does in particular. This allows for local specialties. We have palliative care, neonatal intensive care, Radiation oncology is a fairly big department, Townsville Cancer Centre. Not all the Queensland Health public hospitals have these, and depending on the price of the resource, it's often not cost effective to provide these specialist resources across the entire state. So there's two ways we have these informal consortia. One way is that one library goes to tender, and that's a relatively simple process because it's of low value. There is a threshold there. If we stay under that, we're fine. And then when it's all signed off, other libraries can join up later, because even though we're separate entities, we are still within Queensland Health. It's still all Queensland Health tax dollars. Another way you can do an informal consortia is some publishers are keen to offer an increasing discount the more Queensland Health libraries purchase. This was much easier when we were with the one entity, with one ABN. The publisher has the disadvantage they need to produce multiple invoices and chase multiple invoices when the finance managers sit on them, but the vendors and the publishers make a point of keeping in contact with the library managers anyway, even those of us in the deep north. So it really works quite well. And it means they've got the foot in the door to try and sell more product and new products. So that has worked well informally. How to provide access. The Queensland Health IP range is not visible external to our firewall. So for non-CKN resources, we use Easy Proxy. It's managed by State Library of Queensland. Easy Proxy is in many Australian and overseas universities. Each health service or each hospital has its own iteration. State Library does that. 16 of the Queensland Health Libraries are contracted to State Library Queensland to provide ALMA and Primo, our catalogue and discovery layer. And so it's easy for us to do that. Authentication is by patron registration with the purchasing library. And I've got a screenshot later about that. Cost versus cost effective. Okay, I'm on my hobby horse here. If an expensive resource is heavily used, the cost per inquiry is low. A cheaper resource is a waste of money if it is rarely used and difficult to search. Analysis of the meaningful usage data is absolutely critical. Packages can appear too cheap, they've got thousands of titles in them, but unwanted titles are clutter and they prevent the clinician with average search skills, and that's most of them. They're probably good clinicians, but they're not too posh on searching skills. And it prevents them from finding what is wanted. I mean, I subscribe to Up to Date, and it is so heavily used that it's cost per inquiry is very low dollars. I've got two more headings under this, two more dot points. I probably wouldn't fit it on that slide anyway. Just a few more comments on packages. Purchasing packages of resources comes with particular problems. Rolling files are common, so if you've got it for 5 years, if you advance 1 year, you lose access to the earliest year, the oldest year. Worse still, you lose perpetual access to the back files. This can be critical for journals. In my view, relying on packages is a simple and unsatisfactory solution to a complex problem. I think the best solution is what most Australian universities do, and other states, I'm sure. It is a mix of packages supplemented by individual journal subscriptions to the core journals in each discipline. And I mean medical discipline, nursing discipline, all the allied health specialties. And this takes a lot of work. And titles move in and out of packages all the time. It's like trying to herd cats. It's a full-time job almost. The librarians who interact with clinicians on a daily basis know which titles are in demand. If these staff are not involved in the selection of resources, you can find yourself in an indefensible place. There's two examples of that. Some years ago, one of the state consortia cancelled CINAL, but the key database, with or without linked full text, for allied and nursing health, and they substituted two ostensibly cheaper, but really poor substitutes. And there's also a situation where the largest cardiothoracic hospital in the Southern Hemisphere does not have access to the core journal chest. Now that situation should never have arisen. doesn't matter what sort of consortium you've got, analysis of the usage data is critical. The titles should be monitored regularly for use and thoroughly reviewed every 2 years. And in my opinion, 5 years is far too long. At very least, it should be like our book tender, maybe for 2 years, and then with the couple of options, 1 or 2 years after that. Okay, university and hospital agreements. Some health libraries have or used to have access to Commonwealth Government funding for libraries. Funding came via the university if you were lucky. I used to have that in Melbourne. This funding was never available to the newer medical schools, such as at James Cook Uni. The development of academic health science centres is changing the scenes, especially in regard to funding. Townsville Hospital and James Cook Uni have started moving in this direction. It is a 5-year plan at least. The present situation, Cairns, Townsville and Mackay hospitals all take JCU students. Cairns has an agreement in place. And I'm not quite sure about Mackay. It's a grey area. It's more of a study centre and rather small. For some years, I had a simple agreement with JCU, the University Librarian, whereby an approximate value was calculated using the number of health science students at the JCU Townsville campus. This was roughly equivalent to one full-time library staff member who was employed by the university but worked in the hospital. For various reasons, this has now evolved into a staff member being employed by the health department. This was my choice, actually. The agreement is being examined at the moment, and it is intended that JCU will pay an invoice once or twice a year with regular review. We have a lot of students because JCU's medical degree is 6 years, so we look after students from 3rd years on. A formal agreement would usually be with the university librarian, but it could also be with the medical school, and you hope that you would see evidence of them consulting with and acting on behalf of other health science disciplines at the university. And this could change again with the Academic Health Science Centre. The agreement, of course, will be a very much higher level in the hospital, and perhaps there will be a few clauses about library services and then linking out to some associated documents that service to be provided. Townsville, this is fairly new. Townsville Hospital has what I believe could be a unique agreement with the Townsville Mater, which is a private hospital, just for the intern training year. This year there are 12 interns and they rotate through the Mater, Townsville Hospital and some of the other North Queensland health facilities. The Mater has purchased from me the associate membership of the library, which is fine for delivering basic information, literacy training, borrowing books, using the study carrels. But determining the rights of access to e-resources is very complex, and Cecily talked more about that. Understandably, the locally educated interns become accustomed to our library's service, while undergrads are very disappointed with the sparse resources offered in the private sector. And the agency staff, as I mentioned, they're in a grey area too. In Brisbane, the University of Queensland has for many years provided library services to the major public hospitals, but in July last year, Princess Alexandra Hospital did not renew their agreement, and this library has now joined the Queensland Health Network. And Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital is currently reviewing its agreement with University of Queensland. Any agreement is better with some agreed key performance indicators, and not too many of them, preferably. And also, I think a staff satisfaction survey should be run every couple of years. Don't just take the librarian's word for it. Ask the end users. And you need to do some sort of survey for hospital accreditation purposes anyway, so it can kill two birds with that stone. Okay. Clinicians' experience with access. Of course, what we want is seamless. But just count how many clicks and passwords. I've got about 2 A4 pages of access. Logins and passwords and everything. And a lot of them change frequently. Clinicians don't want to know which publisher gives access to the article they want. They get confused with embargoes, which can be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. They get confused with multiple logins and passwords, and so do I at times. I've got a few screenshots later. The link to the PDF is often placed in different parts of the screen and often won't open. They're in a hurry. Their time is precious and expensive. It should be seamless. Nowadays, clinicians want access to information resources at work, at home, and on one or two mobile devices. Publishers are keen for this, for the extra logins, because they want information about their subscribers so they can monitor their online behaviour and sell more products, either directly to them or to the library. And that's what being in business is all about. And at present, all this activity requires multiple accounts, logins and passwords. Demystifying this complexity is a valuable and valued role for health librarians. It's job security. This is our clinical specialty, the health information resources. Personal preference, I spoke about consultation to do with the other consortia, but personal preference, I've mentioned analysing the usage stats, but sometimes logic and analysis just aren't enough. For instance, a few publishers have been jostling for quite a while to produce the best point-of-care tool. I call them online encyclopedias. We've got Up-to-Date, Dynamed, and Best Practice, BMJ product. Clinicians love Up-to-Date, which is very expensive. There is a constant trickle of articles analysing the content, recency, etc. of competing resources, but clinicians still love Up-to-Date. And some of them, particularly the specialists, have very valid reasons for saying that. It's what they want. Perception and behaviour are very hard to change. That can take a long time if there is a valid reason to change. Perpetual access to back files, I mentioned that before, I'm talking about packages. This is the new age problem. In the old days, you subscribed to a print journal, it sat on the shelves forever or until you ran out of shelf space. Access was easy, no passwords, no printed instructions, no embargoes, but you had to be on site, and this really disadvantaged regional library services such as up here. Next one. Okay. Townsville Health Library, this is our homepage. Yes, it's a LibGuide. It's not published on the open internet. It is as close to a one-stop shop as we can get. If you look on the lower right, under electronic and print resources, you'll see the link to CKN. So we link to CKN. Sadly, CKN doesn't link back to our Queensland Health Library's homepage, which is also out on the internet. We're trying to work on that. So just above the link to CKN, you can see the library search, library catalogue. This is the Primo, and all our bib records are in Alma. And what we have loaded into Alma bib records for all the resources in CKN as much as possible, and also the ones purchased separately by the individual health services. And when necessary, there is a little message in there saying only available to Townsville staff, for instance. We're the only ones who have rehab reference centre. So in the upper right, under electronic resources, that short list at present is the only list, mainly databases. You can see that is available to Townsville Health Service staff only. So how do you get access to that? Staff come to this home page, whether they're at home or at work, and they get this very simple login screen. Now, you don't need to write down, allegedly illegally, your payroll number and surname. It's sort of tattooed on our brains. So this is really simple page. Now, if you're in another health service, say down in Brisbane, you can put in your payroll number and your surname, but unless you're registered as a library user with Townsville, you don't get through. And that's what Easy Proxy does. It manages that. I was asked to talk about future directions. Ideally, yeah, this is real crystal ball stuff. I don't know. Sure, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but ideally we would have one shared subscription for Australian clinicians, one username, one password. Too easy. But in reality, each state has its own tendering process. We have academic, Commonwealth, state and private institutions, plus small players such as GPs and independent practitioners. Some senior health bureaucrats still, and you're not going to believe this, but it's perfectly true, they still believe that it's all free on the internet. senior finance officers gasp at the cost in US dollars, and they can delay or avoid decisions. So it's a very complex situation, and there are a lot of hurdles. The national site license for Cochrane, which Cicely talked about, is probably due to the nature of the Cochrane collaboration itself. It is not in the business of making money. Collaboration versus competitive commerce. Most librarians love collaborating. We know the end result is greater than the sum of the parts. Publishers and vendors are in the commercial world. They are in competition. They're fighting for the same dollars in the library's dwindling budgets. Companies use the term commercial in confidence to protect the company's secrets and help it stay in business, and that's fine. But sometimes I think another rule is applied, by some, not all. You've heard of the saying divide and conquer. So I often talk about divide and charge, like a wounded bull. And it's difficult. It's a grey area, but I'm not entirely comfortable with commercial in confidence. I think it's applied far too often. In recent years, there are fewer players in the publishing and aggregating market. There's less choice. There are more monopolies. I think transparency has suffered, and open negotiation is much more difficult. So the potential benefits of competition are really evaporating. Educational continuum, and this is the last point. This is not evidence-based at all, it's just pure my opinion. Some academics feel that library services should be seamless. They argue library services support the students in their undergrad years and also when they're on placement in the hospitals, and that should continue as they go through their intern years and onwards through all the exams to a clinical specialty. The problem is that the institutions which teach and employ clinicians are funded separately. Perhaps the development of the Academic Health Science Centre will produce a satisfactory model. Both parties will be keeping a close watching brief for any cost shifting. The alternate view is that focus of clinical and academic health libraries could be seen as quite different. Students are given heaps of resources, a bit of guidance, and set off to learn how to do it. No one's going to die as a result of a mistake in an assignment. Clinicians have real patients, real urgencies, so specialised health libraries will do a lot of the work for them, depending on the situation. So how you work that continuum from one to the other, but still provide the seamless access so that the end user knows which password is required and where they are and where they should go. Anyway, I said before, I still think it's job security for health librarians. And that's all I had prepared. So over to you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you very, very much indeed. I'm sure there might be a few questions coming, but there's a couple of comments that I'd like to make. You weren't here for the very beginning session where we had David Ashbridge talking from the sort of CEO of a health organisation perspective, yep. But he was sort of saying, well, the whole health system is actually not a system. And I think you've actually reiterated those key ideas to sort of say the whole information system in health is not systematic or systemic or anything. So just so fragmented. And that's a huge challenge, I think, not only within individual states and territories, but across the nation as a whole. So that, as you say, job security hangs in there with so much of this non-systematic arrangements in there. So that was really good. Another point I picked up on was the review that you referred to with the University of Queensland and Royal Brisbane Hospital. I was working last week with the health librarians at Hurston, so the main campus, if you like, for the hospitals there, and very much around part of their contribution into this review process to sort of how do we evaluate our services. And the sort of workshop that we had together was really to shift away from just counting numbers to look at what contribution are you making, and this goes back to Anne's presentation as well, what contribution are you making to the organisational goals of Royal Brisbane Hospital. So to look far more around the quality of the services that you're providing, the impact that you're having on those organisational goals. So moving quite away from just, well, you know, we had sort of 2,000 people come through our information literacy programs. That doesn't prove anything. So there's lots of levels of the role of librarians in this whole information space. So that I think is really important to consider.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, and I think that's what we've been trying to do in Townsville. And people think libraries is books. They might think electronic resources, but we do a lot of support for research. I mean, it's the ethics committee stuff. We probably know more about the process of submitting a proposal to the ethics committee. And by the way, we've got 2 computers. One's the laptop's got SPSS on it. You can take it into that room and get someone to talk you through it. Good luck, because the librarians, we do lots of information literacy training, but we don't teach SPSS. We back away from that one. But in the future, we could. And I think libraries are not just about information, hoarding them and making them available. It's also about the education, the information literacy training, and also about research. And the research bit is what's really growing in Townsville at the moment. And of course, it's in conjunction with the library, the university that's just across the ring road.
That's right. No, all really, really important points. Just to go sort of back right the way across the 2 sessions with Bronya and then with Cecily before, while you as participants have access to QUT, obviously the health resources in the library here, which you may not normally have access to if you're totally new to the whole health library sector. Otherwise, obviously, those of you working already in the sector, take a critical eye and see what access do you have. Just don't take it for granted. This is what we've got. Look at what you do have. Look at what compare it with the wealth of different resources that are out there as well. So there's very, very many areas that you can consider. So that if you do get time over the next week to explore what resources you do have access to, or what you can sort of explore within QUT because you don't normally have access to that will really help you next week and the next module as a whole, which is very much about the information resources which are available to you, and also the search strategies that you need to be able to develop within the different resources, because that hasn't even been touched on in terms of the idiosyncrasies of all the different database platforms that you're going to have. So Anne, I will just drop down to you about how you cooperate with the local universities. Do you want to take the microphone and speak to that? Or not? Maybe that's not quite happening. Okay, but that's something we can explore. Question for Bronya. Okay, right. Okay, this is going back to you, Bronya, if you'd like to take that.
Thanks, Anne. I thought it was a question for me. Okay. Yeah, the medical school made me an adjunct lecturer, and through that I have access to all the resources in JCU. And we need that because most of the senior clinical staff at the hospital have some sort of often freebie gratis position, no tutoring or lecturing over at the university, and they're often not aware of that. So we can help our staff, hospital staff, when they're doing academic work with students, and of course we help the students. So students saying, I can't find this, we can use that, and it's a resource we don't have in Queensland Health. We can go in and show them how to do it. The agreement I'm working on is with the medical school. The university has actually stepped back from that, so that because it's a 6-year course, as I said, that we have the students from 3rd year on, which is when they start to get the core clinical content, and we have the books and we have specialist online resources. JCU has more of the electronic journals through all the call deals, and that's good, and there is some overlap. There's not all that much difference unless you get to some of the particular core journals for specialties that we have. The ones I mentioned before, radiation oncology and medical physics and this sort of stuff. I think that's just the local situation. We're a fairly small town. There's no way anyone could just justify private or public money to have two separate specialist health libraries. It just has to be the one. And former university librarian and I, John McKinley, going back a bit, going back about 16 years, we considered what would be the best model, and then we just had this fairly loose arrangement. These days, you have to have a contract that's overseas by a lawyer, and that's how it should be. So we have interaction with the library staff. There's a couple of library liaison staff at JCU. One of them is on my library committee. So we keep in touch at that level, and we do some joint presentations to do with research or training in particular databases. The vendors and publishers visit both of us sometimes at the same time when they come up here. So we share a lot, but on the formal basis, the agreement is with the medical school, not the university library. And it's all university money. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully for Anne, but also again, this draws back directly to David's sort of opening gambit around the importance of collaboration and partnerships, not just immediately sort of within the clinical situation or running the hospital, but obviously for the librarians as well. So that's a really important point that, networks are really important, as Anne says there. So that's good.
Oh, there is one other thing I mentioned. For the last couple of years, I've volunteered as an interviewer for prospective medical students, which is a really interesting process. They have one clinician and one academic and one other, and I'm in the other category, and I get a nice voucher in one of the local coffee shops each year. But it's the interaction with all the other staff, and there's a lot of hospital and community people who participate in that. So the JCU school really does make an effort to engage with the community, which is what the equipped standards want anyway.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. And that obviously builds your understanding of the services that are needed as well, or that interaction with the different cohorts of people that are involved in the whole thing. So that's great. Good. Yes, as Anne says, we are part of the health world. Yes, totally. And if the information is critical to it, just one quick question around sort of, I suppose, e-health, and in the sense of what might be happening in the e-health records. Are librarians getting involved in any of that area at all, or is that health informatics, and where's the overlay? I mean, that might be a question for Anne as much as it is for you, Bronya. I don't know.
Well, my contribution will be very quick, and then Anne can provide the perspective, but yes, I am involved. I wanted to get involved some years ago when IEMR was just a gleam in everyone's eye, at least in Queensland. But it was too soon, and of course it's linking in the valuable CKN and other resources in there. And just in the last, it's being rolled out. There's a new rollout. Next stage is coming to Townsville very soon. But I'm presently negotiating with the IEMR electronic record project lead to try and get both Dynamed and UpToDate linked in to the health record, but particularly UpToDate because it's just so heavily used.
Right, good. Yeah.
So we can take the lead there. The project lead is focused on other things. I mean, it's run from Brisbane, but each hospital, each area decides when they're going to roll out which modules. But librarians can take the lead here because we know the way these databases work. We've got the contacts in the industry, And the publishers, the vendors, they're really keen to use the health librarians as the conduit so that they can get what they want. Now, obviously, not all the resources can be linked in via Dog's Breakfast, but yeah, I think we've got a very valuable role there.
Great, thank you. No, that's great. And Leslie, as you can see in the chat box there, Leslie just contributed there to sort of say that, yeah, there's an ever increasing need for partnerships between the different libraries. The dollar is getting harder to achieve, but the need is increasing at the same time for access to quality information, so that's really good. And Anne is commenting as well around, again, taking the lead in the co-location integration with the electronic medical records, etc. So it's a bit like the Big Bang and the expanding universe. Things just keep growing and flowing into lots of new areas. But thank you, Bronya. You've brought some quite different insights into the discussion for this evening. So that's been really appreciated, certainly from my side anyway. So thank you for all the contribution that you've been able to make.
Happy to help.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll keep in touch over the next week or so. I realise it's already 8 o'clock, and so we're sort of really come to the end. Those of you who are able to stay, I was just, if you're interested and need a bit of more information, there's probably about 5 minutes where I'll sort of just run through the requirements for assignment 1, bearing in mind that time is a critical factor for you all in this area. So the slides are here. I'm not going to go through every single one. It's almost like a navigation path through Blackboard. I think a lot of you have probably explored that already, but it basically goes, the next few slides just go step by step through the different pages of Blackboard to where you need to sort of get into the information. The due date, this is the part for you to sort of make sure that's front and centre of your mind. That's the 27th of March, which I think is Easter Sunday off the top of my head, but I'm not quite relating to Easter at the moment. So make sure that you're aware of that. The details of the assignment are set out, but on Blackboard, obviously. And the area where you upload it, it might seem a little bit hidden to some of you. The very bottom box in that screen there, so it's got summary of the assignment and what the requirements are, etc., etc. And then at the bottom, there's this funny little logo with sort of, not quite sure what it is. It looks like a T-square or something, but something, ruler and a pencil. But assignment 1, submit your assignment here. So that is where you need to go. And thank you, Leslie, for reminding us or confirming that it's Easter Sunday. So you have lots of chocolate on the day. So that's where you submit the assignment, and there are some buttons that you need to do to upload your file, attach your file, etc. One thing I would like to point out is we actually ask you, if possible, to name your file with certain file naming protocols, and that's clearly in the assignment brief as well as on the page. It just makes it much easier for us to manage all of the assignments as they come in. So your assignment brief is where you get all the information, and that's a screenshot of what you get there, so if you haven't read it yet. Leslie says, will there be some leeway for those of us who will be away from the internet that day? Yes, I would say so. I'm certainly not going to be sitting at the end of the computer waiting for them to drop in. So yes, bearing in mind it is a long weekend, then yeah, within a day or so would be great. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Thank you, Leslie. So what you need to do, these are the main things. Okay, so you need to organise your visit to a health sciences library, and within Blackboard on that page there is an attached document which has a long list of libraries. You've got immense support across the health library sector for the work that we're doing here. So, but you're not limited to those libraries. If there's one in your local area, then feel free to make contact with them. And then what we need you to do is to develop a semi-structured interview, so part of the research process, which does cover the questions you wish to ask. And then after the interview, prepare your written report. And we also ask you to prepare a reflection and self-allocation of grades, so critical appraisal in practice. So, as I say, the libraries are listed, but you don't have to use those. But obviously, if you're not in a metropolitan area, and dare I say, a lot of those libraries are metropolitan, of course, then make sure that you make contact with whatever libraries around. Yes, it's your choice. It's a very much freedom of choice assignment to do this. When you do contact the library manager, it's, I suppose, polite to provide some information about the course and about the assignment. A lot of people do know about the course, but they might have forgotten about it because we set a lot of this up last year. So just introduce what the rationale for what you're trying to do. This slide is probably quite important to look at the scheduling. So week 2 is now, this is this week. You need probably to make sure that you do identify the library and make preliminary contact with the librarian there so that you can plan your visit for next week. Okay, so that's gives, just thinking, if you go backwards from the due date is around Easter and you've got to write the report, etc., etc. So you've got to sort of schedule what you've got to get done. If you can draft your interview questions and then send the questions to your interviewee, that's also another way to make sure that they've given some thought to the ideas that you want to explore. Then in week 3, so the 14th of March onwards, make your visit, go and visit them and conduct the interview. And then you've got a week or so to write up the report and submit your work during Blackboard, via Blackboard, not during Blackboard, sorry. There's information within the area about developing an interview schedule. If you haven't done this before, this might be a new activity for you. So it's not about just going to have a chat. You're going to actually have an interview with some sort of focus. And again, as I think I iterated at the very beginning of the program, you're all at different stages of your careers in health librarianship. So there's no expectations that you do ask specific questions. Draw on what you feel you want to learn about that fits in with the level of understanding that you're developing at any given time. So if you've already worked in a health library for a year or so, the type of questions you might want to ask may be quite different if you've just started and this is your first exploration into the field. So the idea is you draft some open-ended questions. They're not yes-no. You're trying to get some good responses from them. And then allow, it's not going to be total Q&A. You're going to have to sort of chat and discuss things through and have some prompting questions and probing questions for where you'd like to actually learn a little bit more. I suggest that you do send the questions ahead of time so that you've got that. But as I say, there's readings around semi-structured interviews on the website and things. So, but if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to just let us know. Maybe post them to the Facebook site because other people might well have the answered as well. We suggest around 2,000 words, but there's no word count per se. Obviously you don't want it terribly waffly and you don't want it too brief. The thing from our experience of the assignments last year, don't spend too much time being descriptive about the library. What we're looking for really is a critical discussion about the key aspects of the information you've gathered. And I think what you've been listening to over the past couple of weeks has introduced you to all of that ability to consider things critically and not just, it's not descriptive and no further. We would like you to use a structured report format. So if that's new to you, then there's some resources to help you understand that. But again, this feeds into the work that you do in health libraries. You are working with an organisation. The communication channels, the communication protocols are likely to be very much more formalized than an essay or anything. So look at what, if you are working in an organization, what's the expectation in that organization for corporate report writing, to make sure that you do align with those sort of areas. So there's practice for you if it is a new area. And then critical reflection, this also might be a little bit new for some of you. We want you to think about what you've learned from the process. So it's about considering what your understandings were when you came into the course, the process of developing your questions, and your responses to the information that you've received. So certainly think about your own learning. But then also, what about the quality of your work? Taking into that organisational context, you're part of an organisational team. What's the quality of the work that you're presenting in terms of what the expectations are in that communication situation in that organisation? So look at the quality of the work that you're producing as well. And there are marking criteria. We do criteria in referenced assessment here. So there's lots of hints that you can sort of map the standard of the work that you're producing to those criteria that are there. So there's lots of scaffolding, lots of help for you to go through that. And so this is really important. We're not testing your knowledge. It's about developing your learning and understanding. So it really is about what do you want to get out from this, but we're able to then provide some feedback and help, sort of constructive feedback, to help you develop some of that learning a little bit further. You've heard a lot about policy, but today you've also heard quite a bit about practice as well. So again, if you want to go back through the recordings as you're developing your questions, what were the key issues that you felt were really important that you would like to know a little bit more about? Self-allocation of grade, Anna says. That is actually sort of saying, okay, well, if this is an academic assignment, what's it worth? Do I think it's worth a 7, or do I know that I really haven't had time and it's just been something I've wanted to sort of like rush through? Therefore, based on the criteria, and those are your guiding statements, if you like, how do you map the quality of your work to the criteria in reference assessment? If you were actually doing the marking of somebody else's work, how would you rate it? So again, it's having that critical eye over what you're producing, how it aligns with the standards of expectations of academic work. And that's been stressed, I think, through some of the presentations today as well, that you're working in a very professional environment, often a university or academic environment as well. So that's the cohort of people that you're working with. So yeah, so it's probably quite new for you to sort of say, well, if, not just, I'll submit that assignment and I'll take what I get. And if the lecturer thinks I get a 5, so be it, it's a 5. What do you feel, and why do you feel that it's valued at that level? So it's just developing that sort of thought processes for you. Okay, so if there's any feedback on that. So I'm sure that was very, very fast. But if there are any further questions, as I say, post them to Facebook if they're generic. If you have any personal concerns, then let us know. So Anna says that's a new process. But QUT is quite comfortable with asking students to do that. It's a valuable way for you to actually sort of think about the work that you are submitting and reflecting on that. So that's all good. So we don't want to make it too scary, but it's a fair enough approach to take to make you think. And equally well, in the workplace, presumably if you're producing work, you're self-evaluating as you go through as well. So, but as I say, it's all trial and error. If it's the first time you've done it, don't fret about it, don't become anxious about it. It's just part of the learning curve in that way. So that probably completes tonight's session. Thank you for staying with us. That's been absolutely great. Next week, there must be another slide because I always think ahead. Things to do in the coming week. go back and look over any of the materials, and again you'll be swamped by the richness of the resources that are there. No, you don't have to read them all this week. They're there for you to explore in your own time. Potentially as you're constructing your interview or writing your report, you might like to link back some of the things that you've received in terms of the interview responses, to link that back to the documents and how that relates. So to take that sort of angle of saying, well, it's not just taken in isolation, it's taken in the wider context of the health sector as a whole. The recording will obviously be available as soon as we get it processed, which is good. And so you've got the assignment work to do there. So the next class, we've concluded module 1 with all of this. Although obviously you're working on your assignment, so you're not cutting it off. The next module is around health information resources in far more detail, and the actual searching processes. So there'll be a lot to cover. There are quite a few videos. If you start looking at the module 2 information, some of the resources, PubMed and all of those, they've got training videos. So there's always the opportunity, if you have time, to start exploring some of them, so that when our guest speaker for the next module is Cheryl Hamill, we'll introduce her properly next week, but she's from Western Australia and is very, very skilled in this area of health information research. Basically, she's going to introduce you to some of the resources. You'll understand a lot more if you've just gone through some of those videos, which are just exploratory, basic information, introductory type materials. You'll probably get more out of it if you can sort of cover the bases, so to speak. So if you've got time, have a go at that. So from my side, I'm actually not going to be with you next week. I'm going to be almost in Singapore. I'll still be in the air when you all meet, hopefully. And I'm actually going to Sri Lanka to run some workshops with the Sri Lankan Library Association. So that's where I'll be heading. The following week, so whatever that is, week 4, I will be running the workshops, but I'm planning my workshop time around to make sure that I can actually be available to join you and introduce things at the very beginning of the class, all being well. So watch this space, but it will be global in terms of what we're doing. But Kate is going to be at the helm. I'll come back to you, Robin, in a minute. Yeah, so Kate will be there, and also Cecily is going to be sort of master of ceremonies and take you through and introduce Cheryl, etc. So it should be a really good. Module 2 is, well, it's all good, but Module 2, I think, is where a lot of librarians feel very much at home and start developing some of those hands-on skills. Robin has asked, is it compulsory to visit the library for your interview? No, obviously we're running an online course. So no, there's plenty of ways that you could negotiate with the person that you'd like to interview. There's obviously 2 sides to it. If you're not familiar with health libraries, it might be quite interesting to do a physical visit. But equally well, no, phone, Skype, or whatever platform that you might have access to, that's also good. There was a couple of people have sort of said the actual librarians have said they'd prefer to not conduct an interview at work. They'd prefer to have it perhaps at a coffee shop in a more informal situation. So there's no set scenario. You can choose and work with. Obviously, your interviewee is going to be the person who's going to be the most responsive that you need to do. So, but certainly, don't underestimate the value of this assignment. Quite a few jobs came out of their interviews. The participants who conducted the interviews and got on very well with the people they interviewed. When job opportunity came up a few months later, they were actually high on the list of potential applicants. So if you're looking for a job, then there's opportunities too. So networking, as we've sort of stressed throughout this this presentation or this session, is really, really important. But I think we've done enough for tonight. Thank you all very much indeed, and I'll be with you in 2 weeks' time, but I'll listen to the recording next week as well. I'll say any questions, just get in touch. But thank you to you all, and good night.